All right, moving on to 7.5 and 7.6. Today we'll do some in 7.5, which kind of leads us right into 7.6. We've done a little bit of this already, so we're just going to kind of review and try and put it all together. I'm going to start with a pretty easy example. So I have x cubed plus 4x squared minus x minus 4. What we need to think about first are what are your options for solving this to find all the zeros and all the factors. So we need to get the factors so we can tell you what the zeros are. Where's it crossing the x-axis? So we have some options. First method we could go by is, can you factor the problem? Okay? It's a great method, and you can actually factor this one, and we'll do that in a second. That method will work great. If you can factor the problem, you will get really nice zeros. All right? Another option is you could just type this into your graphing calculator and let's look at the x-axis and see, are any of them nice ones? Okay? Again, you just get nice ones off your graphing calculator. Well, we know that not all problems are going to be factorable and not all problems are going to have all nice answers. You could have a problem that has all imaginary answers, so you're going to have another method. So this third method is the one you're going to use most often. Okay? We're going to see if we can get at least one good one from our graphing calculator. Once we get that, we're going to use it to depress the polynomial down to an x squared. Once we get it down to x squared, we can either keep factoring or use the quadratic formula. So taking a look at this easy problem. First method would, let's see how you do it by factoring. I'm going to factor by grouping. I'm going to group the first two together. Take out x squared, I'm left with x plus 4. Group this second group together, take out negative 1 and get x plus 4. So now you can take the factor x plus 4 out and x squared minus 1 is left. So that's a square minus square, so I'll break that down to x plus 1, x minus 1. So my factors are x plus 4, x plus 1, x minus 1. Makes sense that I get 3 of them, because I'm talking about a cubed problem. If those are the factors, what are the zeros? Negative 4, negative 1, and positive 1. That's where this graph is going to cross the x-axis. Now, you would never get any more than 3 because it's an x to the third problem. So if you used option 2, the calculator, type this into y equals on your graphing calculator. When you do that, you're just going to look at that graph. You should see these 3 answers, negative 4, negative 1, and 1, getting hit on the calculator. Now, of course, you want to double check in the table. And when you look at the table of values, it should say negative 4, 0, negative 1, 0, and 1, 0. You know there's only 3, so you don't have to keep looking. But what if you have to use option 3? What if they tell you you have to show all the work? So how do you do it using the third option? Okay? First we're going to look at our calculator. So you go back to your calculator and look. Now I know that you can see all 3 of these answers. Okay? What we want to know is just get me one good one. I know there's 3 of them. I'm just going to randomly pick one. And it doesn't matter which of these 3 you pick. I'm just going to pick the positive one. Okay? You could do the same problem if you picked either of those other 2. Okay? So I'm going to pick the 1. So 0. The 0 of the problem is 1, so the factor has to be x minus 1. Now, if that is a factor, I know I can put 1 in the box, and I can go ahead and depress it. So I know this should work. If it doesn't work, I've done something wrong. So I have to get a 0 for the remainder. So I know that x minus 1 is one of my factors. That's this guy. But this is my other factor. So that would be x squared plus 5x plus 4. Now, just like you did in the previous day's homework, you would keep factoring that. So you would have x minus 1, and then you would try to unfoil. With a 4, you want to get a 5. So let's use plus 4 and plus 1. So it's factored. What are the zeros? 1, negative 4, and negative 1. So you get the same answers. So this would be a longer method for this particular problem, but this was one of the easiest problems. So you need to keep that in mind. We're trying to get the process. So let's do a couple examples. So example number 2. So it doesn't give you any starting point. So you have to put this into your graphing calculator and figure out a good 0. So I'm typing that in my graphing calculator. X to the third plus 2x squared minus 4x minus 8. And I notice that it looks like this. Now I should tell you that that means a lot to me. This right here is a bump. That's where we get that double root. So that should mean something to us. And then this one over here is a 0. So which one looks like it's in a nice spot? Well, it looks like that might be -2. That's going to be my guess. So I'm going to go to the table and look at -2 and see if that's a 0. And sure enough, at -2, there's a 0 in my table of values. So I know that -2 is a 0. So x plus 2 would be my factor. So I should be able to put -2 in, and it should work. Whoops. -4 plus 0 is -4. Now you should catch any mistakes you make because you have to get a remainder of 0. So I've got x plus 2, and from this depressed polynomial I have x squared minus 4, which tells me that'll factor, because it's a square minus square, difference of squares, x plus 2, x minus 2. Those are my factors. What are the zeros? And remember, that could also be called the roots. Don't want to forget that. So it looks like I got -2, -2, and 2. So this right here gives us that double root. There's the double root, there's the other 0. Now looking back at your calculator, you should also have been able to tell that that was 2. Not all of them will have nice answers like this. Let's look at another one. Okay? For all of these, you're going to start by putting them in your graphing calculator. So go ahead and type it in your graphing calculator. X cubed minus 3x squared plus 4x minus 12. You want to make sure you type it in correctly, or you're going to get the wrong answer. So all I see on my calculator screen is this. And it's my 10 by 10 screen. So it looks like there's only one real 0. But I'm looking for 3. So my guess is there's one real, there's probably 2 imaginary. So we know it's not going to factor all the way down, because to get the imaginary ones, you got to get something that won't factor. So I check my table of values, and I recognize that at 3, it's a 0. So this is 3. So 3 is a 0, and x minus 3 is the factor. So depress your polynomial. So you put 3 in the box, 1, -3, 4, -12. And sure enough, it works. But now I know I've got x minus 3, and then my depressed polynomial is x squared plus 4. That will not factor. So that's it. If they ask you for the factors, those are your factors. But we have to figure out what our zeros are. Well, this one gives you 3. This one you have to figure out. So you could use your quadratic formula, but it would be faster if you just said it equals -4, so if I square root both sides, I'll get plus or minus 2i. So those are your 3 zeros. So not everything will come out nicely, but you should be able to get 1 off of your graphing calculator. We would know that you couldn't get all imaginary answers because remember, imaginary ones come in pairs. So there's no way possible to get all imaginary answers for an x cubed problem.